Hello and welcome to Rally Point Wargaming, a video series dedicated to the how, the whats and the whys of assembling your armies in the Warhammer 40k universe. All rules and overall points are accurate at the time this video was posted. Here at Rally Point Wargaming we dig giant robots. We hope that you dig giant robots. After all, who doesn't dig giant robots? There are songs about it and everything. But just in case you're not already convinced, allow me to introduce my Imperial Knights army, the Hounds of War. As usual, this will be a 2000 point match play list featuring two detachments, one from the Imperial Knight Codex itself, and a second support detachment from Codex Astra Militarum. The Knight detachment will be a super heavy detachment which allows you to take up to 5 Lords of War units together, which due to special rules in the Knight Codex will be referred to as a Knight Lance, and offers similar command point refunds to any normal army taking a patrol or battalion. For the detachment rules, I'll be using the custom household traditions that can be found in the Psychic Awakening supplement, Engine War, which adds a lot of additional benefits to Knights, as they are still technically using an 8th edition codex and haven't yet been fully updated to 9th. The traditions I'm taking are Hounds of War, but you can't guess where I got the title of the list from, which means that Armigers, which are the smaller knights, can fall back out of combat and still shoot or charge, and Blessed Arms, which adds 6 inches to the range of all the weapons that are usually 24 inches or more, and 2 inches to everything else. Really trying to maximise the ability to keep opponents at arm's length and not get tied down. On top of this, knights also have a choice of allegiance, either to the Imperium or the Mechanicus. This doesn't change who you can or can't ally with, but it may affect your access to stratagems, warlord traits and relics. For this list I've gone with Questor Mechanicus, meaning that every model in this detachment regains 1 lost wound at the start of each of my turns. Now, unfortunately, one of the main weaknesses of the Knights as a faction is the complete lack of infantry. And despite their imposing size and reputation, an army of large, single models struggles when it comes to playing the mission aspect of the game, which is where the Astra Militarum Patrol comes in. This will be a Tempestus Scions detachment using the 9th Iotan Gorgons Regiment, which has an ability that means whenever one of your infantry models shoots, if it hits on an unmodified 6, it counts as an additional hit. 1 shot, 2 hits, which is good, but the real reason I've picked the Gorgons is for their unique stratagem. See, most Tempestus infantry have some form of deep strike ability, but the Gorgons have Daring Descent, which for 1 command point allows a unit to deep strike more than 5 inches away from an enemy unit instead of the usual 9, which will be important later in the list. So first off, back to the Knights, and we start with the only true big guy in the list, a Knight Preceptor. A Questoris class Knight, i.e. the 24 wound class, the Preceptor is known for its ability to buff and support the smaller Armiger class Knights, allowing any of them within 6 inches of it to reroll once to hit. The only other thing that makes it stand out from its standard Knight brethren is the main weapon, the Las Impulsor, which has 2 firing modes. 2d6, strength 6, AP 2, damage 3 shots at 42 inches, or d6, strength 12 shots with an AP of 4 and d6 damage at 20 inches. Both these ranges include the bonus granted thanks to Blessed Arms, and in the Engine War book, there's also a stratagem specifically for the Preceptor that allows you to change the latter profile from d6 shots to an automatic 6, which makes his weapon incredibly deadly. It's also the only knight in the Codex that can take a multi-laser, which doubles the output of the standard heavy stubber for free, and I've also chosen to take the Storm Spear rocket pod, rounding out its shooting with an additional barrage of 3 strength 8, AP 2, damage 6 rockets. For melee, besides the Titanic feat that all larger knights have to deal with hordes of squishy infantry, it has the Thunderstrike Gauntlet that gives it a monstrous melee profile, basically being a giant power fist, as well as the ability to toss the flaming hulks of any vehicles it can kill, and squeeze the life out of characters as if they were oversized stress balls. It will also be my Warlord, using the trait Iron Bulwark, which increases its 5+ ranged invulnerable save to a 4+, and it also carries the relic the Helm Dominatus, which allows the Preceptor to target an enemy unit within 24 inches, and any Armigers within 6 inches of that Preceptor get +1 to hit when targeting that unit, and this can apply to either shooting or melee attacks. This is also a Questor Mechanicus only relic, which is another reason why I chose that allegiance. I also feel a number of the stratagems in Questor Mechanicus are a little bit more beneficial than the Imperialis ones. Now, I have been mentioning Knight Armigers a lot, so I think it's time we actually got some in this list. And we start off with the Armiger Warglaves. Now, these are close assault variants, which I'm taking as a single unit of 3, though thanks to the squadrons rule they act independently once they hit the board. Each has a thermal spear, a D3 shot melter gun with a range of 36 inches thanks to Blessed Arms. And as I mentioned earlier, the Knight Codex is still technically an 8th edition codex, which means that these weapons are still using the old melter rule, which means at half range you roll 2 dice and pick the highest when determining damage. Now oddly enough, because the basic melter gun that 2 of my Warglaves also have appears in other armies that have been updated, they use the newer D6 plus 2 damage at half range profile for melter weaponry instead. The Warglaves also have a Reaper Chain Cleaver, which gives them some serious punch in melee with 2 different profiles, one designed for dealing with infantry swarms and the other for tougher elite units. Now if you keep them close and they make it into combat together, the stratagem Pack Tactics can increase their attacks to really start making a mess out of anything they hit. Next is a pair of Armiger Helverins, again taken as a single unit. These are more long range than the Warglaves, with no real melee ability other than their base profile. However, they are carrying a pair of Armiger autocannons. 2 D3 shots per gun at strength 7, AP 1 and a damage of 3, which makes them pretty threatening to a number of high priority units, especially with the buffs from the Preceptor. They do also have access to a stratagem that allows one of them to take 6 shots per gun for a turn rather than bothering with the 2d3, for when you really need something dead. The last unit in this detachment is another unit of 3 Armigers, but not one you'll actually find in the Knight Codex. Instead, this is a Forgeworld model, the rules for which can be found in the Imperial Armour Compendium book. The Knight Moirax is identical to a standard Armiger in almost every way, except they lack an additional carapace weapon. It's able to perform heroic interventions as if it were a character, and it has access to a number of more esoteric weapon options, more at home on the 30k battlefield than 40k, such as Volkite weapons, graviton guns and conversion beamers. In this instance I've armed each with a pair of lightning locks, meaning that each model puts out 12 shots at strength 6, AP 2 with 1 damage at 42 inch range, once again thanks to Blessed Arms. The trick to lightning locks is that every hit roll on an unmodified 6 counts as 3 hits instead of just 1, so as unlikely as it may be, it is theoretically possible to roll 12 dice and get 36 hits. Even without this multiplication, a unit of 3 lightning lock armed Moirax can put out a pretty impressive amount of firepower. Moving over to the Militarum detachment, and it's pretty bare bones, here primarily to drop onto objectives and perform the Scrambler secondary missions. We start with the HQ and the Elite section, which tie in together so closely I almost consider them one choice. The Tempestor Prime starts in reserves along with the Tempestor's command squad, who are all armed with melter guns. And this is a unit that will make use of the Daring Descent stratagem that I mentioned earlier, dropping in outside of 5 inches of a target and still being able to get that full half-range melter bonus. The Prime will then drop in behind them at the standard 9 inches and use his voice of command to give them a reroll 1s to either to hit or to wound depending on their target. Also, as I mentioned in the last video, I've once again included an assassin as an Imperial agent. I've marked it down as the Calidus again, as again I feel this is the most flexible and opponents will use a lot of command points to focus down as many knights as they can in the early game. However, I can see the use of any of the others. Knights don't have much in the way of psychic defense, so the Calexis could prove helpful. The Eversaw is a great distraction and can chew through dangerous melee units that are looking to engage knights in combat, where they're pretty much at their weakest. And the Vindicar can be used to snipe out opposing support characters and remove the structure their army functions around, or just other dangerous melee characters. Finally, we have the troops units, and although a patrol only really needs 1 unit, I decided to take 3, again primarily to drop onto objectives, perform scramblers, and try not to get dead. Hotshot lasguns can work in a pinch, as despite only being strength 3 they do have an AP of 2, and the Gorgon's ability can on occasion increase their output enough to deal with other small skirmishing units. But there we have the army as a whole, and I will admit while I would love this to be a competitive list, unfortunately at the time of posting, the Knights are at a severe disadvantage. As I mentioned earlier, as an army of single models they struggle with objective-based missions, give up a number of easy secondaries simply due to what they are, i.e. Titanic vehicles with high wounds, and really need some sort of in-codex infantry support or rules to cover the lack of before they could work as a mono-faction. I mean, despite what they are, walking representations of the machine god itself, they are surprisingly flimsy. As with a lot of units in the game at the moment, the arms race of ridiculous damage output has rapidly outstripped what a toughness 8 model with a 3+ armor save and a 5+ invulnerable save can deal with, even if it does have 24 wounds, never mind the smaller 12 wound armigers. This is even more obvious in melee, where they don't even have an invulnerable save short of a single relic, and regularly get torn to shreds by any semi-competent melee unit, which is exactly why I've written this list with the intention of keeping at range. It was even worked out that the recently touted competitive edge Razorflail Succubus that I included in my Succubus party list can easily bring down a Questoris Knight from full wounds in one round of combat. That's basically a 60-point unit able to bring down another unit in excess of 450 points without breaking a sweat. Similarly, from an offensive side, their damage output, while decent, is nowhere near the levels of silly that we've started to see in recent books, such as the Sisters of Battle Retributor Squad, which are a dominant force in the meta at the moment, who get 8 meltergun shots with an effective range of 32 inches per squad, for only about 20 points more than the Warglaves, and cheaper than the Moirax or the Helverins. And I'm not talking about the squads of armigers, I mean each individual armiger. And that's before we even start talking about the points values of the Questoris Knights. Now you might say, well yeah, but the Knight is tougher. But it's also much more difficult to hide. The Questoris is too big to benefit from cover, or even be obscured, and most Retributor squads will start the game in a transport and only be deployed when they can see their optimal target. Now, obviously we could theory hammer unit per unit on paper all day, but you get the idea. Now, having said all that, I'm not the kind of player to give up on something just because it's not super competitive, and the meta will always shift. We never know what will be added once the new codex drops. I'm in no way trying to put people off Knights, I love them. I love setting them up on the table and seeing my opponent's face. But if you're in a hyper-competitive kind of gaming circle, I just want to make sure that anyone looking into this is aware that it does have some inherent flaws, and as it stands, in this case, biggest isn't always best. But that will do it once again, so please feel free to share your opinion of this list with me in the comments, or if you're so inclined to playtest it yourself, the only thing I ask is that you let me know how you got on. And finally, if you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will see you once again next time at the Rally Point.